And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, January 2nd. I am the host for today's program, Paul DeMain, and many of the stories read here can also be found at our website, IndianCountryTV.com, and here are some of those news stories for the day. Activists say a New Year's Eve protest of beer sales in Whiteclay, Nebraska ended peacefully, with three of the Nebraska's town's 4 alcohol stores closing early and making a very few late-night sales to Native Americans. Native American activist Olawan Martinez says January 1st that 2 of the 4 stores had already shut their doors when protesters arrived at 9 p.m. and a third closed around 10 p.m. The stores usually close around midnight. Martinez credited the Ogallala Sioux Tribe's police department for setting up an alcohol checkpoint between Whiteclay and South Dakota's Pine Ridge Reservation, where alcohol is banned. In August, several activists were arrested after they locked arms and blocked the main road through town. Critics blame Whiteclay for alcoholism and poverty on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Former Iditarod champion Lance Mackey has won the inaugural running of the Top of the World 350 sled dog race. Mackey crossed the finish line in Tok on December 30th, about 40 minutes ahead of the second-place finisher, Yukon Quest International sled dog race veteran musher Jerry Wilomitzer. Jake Berkowitz, this year's Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race rookie, was third, coming in about 8 minutes later in the 350-mile race. 22 teams competed in the race, which was held as a tribute to Eagle Village tribal chief Isaac Junabe. He passed away earlier this year at the age of 71 in an auto accident. Teams carried items to remember Junabe to present to Eagle Village residents, where a traditional dance and potlatch were held in his honor last week. The First Nations chief, entering the 4th week of her hunger strike, is urging supporters of the Idle No More movement and Aboriginal chiefs to come together in a united front at a time when relations with the Harper government are becoming more dangerous and strained with each passing day. Chief Teresa Spence made the plea January 2nd as the movement appears ready to ramp up in the coming days. It also came days after the founders of Idle No More attempted to distance themselves and the grassroots organizations from the Native chiefs. Rail blockades have already taken place in Quebec and Ontario as demonstrations take place around the world, and Spence's spokespeople said January 2nd in a written statement that the situation is becoming more volatile. The statement added that chiefs who met in Ottawa last week plan to launch countrywide economic disturbances if Prime Minister Stephen Harper doesn't meet with Spence. On social media, activists were calling for blockades of border crossings on January 5th to show the government that we're willing to escalate this to a point where we want to shut the country down. Spence has become a focal point for Idle No More, subsiding on nothing more than fish broth and water since December 11th. She has said she'll starve herself to death if Harper doesn't meet with her, but has also suggested that a meeting between the government and Native chiefs to discuss treaty resources and concerns would suffice. Harper has so far not said if he'll meet with Spence. The newly elected president of the Ogallala Sioux Tribe has been injured in a one-vehicle wreck on the Pine Ridge Reservation in western South Dakota. Brian Brewer's administrative assistant says the cause of the December 29th wreck is so far unknown. The Rapid City Journal reports that Brewer suffered cuts to his head and a broken hip, but the spokesman for the tribe says it was a clean break, and the president is expected to make a fast recovery and won't sideline Brewer's ability to fulfill his presidential duties for the tribe. Brewer is being treated at the Rapid City Regional Hospital. The wreck was near Red Shirt Table. Relatives of an 8-year-old boy fatally mauled by dogs as he played in the snow in a small community in northwestern New Mexico say there were no screams or barks that would have alerted them to the attack. Keith Comosona and Thomas J. Hanio's mother were caring for the boy's 3 younger brothers in their Pine Hill home when they learned the 8-year-old wasn't at a relative's nearby residence as he was supposed to be. Komosona said he and Yolanda Hanio then found the boy, who was already passed away. The family dog and 8 strays were rounded up and put down. The Navajo Nation, like many reservations, has long had a problem with roaming stray, feral, and neglected dogs. After a 55-year-old man was found mauled to death 2 years ago in a small community near Gallup, the tribe did go after part of the problem. The Navajo Nation official in 2011 estimated there were 4 to 5 dogs for each of the more than 89,000 households on the reservation. That's potentially as many as 400,000 dogs or more, most of which roam free, killing livestock and biting people with alarming frequency. The federal government recently returned a collection of artifacts to anonymous members of northern Arizona's Hopi Tribe. The proceeding involved a substantial expenditure of tax dollars, but the federal government has refused to provide an accounting of the money spent to return the archaeological treasure trove to the tribe under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. The government has also declined to describe the repatriated items. Our intent is to honor the tribe's request, made in consultation not to disclose information, the government answered repeatedly to questions asked by the Arizona Republic. The government's response hints at an underlying controversy that has festered since the Repatriation Act was adopted in 1990. The items returned to the Hopi were collected during archaeological digs on the Coconino National Forest near Flagstaff. Records indicate the items include the remains of the magician, one of the most scientifically important burial subjects ever found in the Southwest and perhaps one of the most sacred of the Hopi ancestors. The man was buried at a place known as Ridge Ruin. The site was undisturbed for centuries until the late 1930s when John McGregor, an archaeologist at the Museum of Northern Arizona, uncovered the skeleton and hundreds of carefully placed funeral objects that range from jewelry, baskets, and cutting blades to mountain lion teeth. Some researchers suggested the man was a traveling Aztec merchant. The Hopi called the man in English the swallower of the sticks. McGregor wrote in 1943 that the magician comprised the richest burial ever reported in the Southwest. Others described it as the King Tut of northern Arizona. To this day, the magician remains a subject of research, even though the Hopi continue to closely guard the sacredness of their religious practices. Nearly 179,000 whole or partial corpses have been identified nationwide, with nearly 13,000 of those returned to tribes. More than 2/3 of the remains have not been linked to modern tribal entities. About 2 million funeral or sacred objects have been inventoried by the museums and agencies. Roughly 176,000 of those items have been turned over to tribes as well. And that's going to be another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We hope you enjoy the rebroadcast of the Menominee Nation Sobriety Powwow that's in the live stream now. Thank you for joining with us, and come back again soon.